problem, us being associated with Vikings. I think that's it could be worse, right?
Viking can be positive and negative, I guess. They weren't really that nice, but they
had a lot of grit and
they worked hard.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess that's what you have to do today in Silicon Valley, perhaps as well.
Yeah,
that's certainly in Silicon Valley, at least, right?
Yeah, no, I think we have, very much a super strong community of now in this AI space. A lot of talent and also a lot of experience now from successful companies like Spotify, Klarna, founders who has done it before and are at it again. And so the Viking approach of it is you need the granddad, right? You don't want him to be on the couch. You need them to train the next generation.
And I guess in some way, if you do a number of exits, and I think Sweden is one of the top number of unicorns per capita kind of countries. So in that sense, at least we have capital being generated here in Sweden, as long as it stays in Sweden. I'm not sure about the recent Klarna, Sandahl acquisition there by the Workday. I mean, I hope some of the money gets back into the Swedish ecosystem, but who knows, right? I mean, it could simply be that they move to US.
Yeah, I think this is where we have a lot of work to do. And if you look at EU Inc. and the work that is going on now to foster to really rally Europe as a political and capital region is around how do we grow talent, but also, and how do we start companies, but also how do we exit companies, and doesn't note companies in the regions here in some of the stock public listings here in Europe instead of it always happening in the US.
Right. Yeah.
And also the exit possibilities for software startups. I mean, there are very few in Europe, I would say, without being like a real expert on that subject.
I mean, Klarna did the IPO right recently as well in US, and so did Spotify, of course, for many years back. And I guess it's a bit sad that happens. I'm just, sometimes it is kind of a brain drain from Sweden and Europe, and we do have a lot of talents here, of course, and we have some capital to get started, not to the level that Silicon Valley has, but still, it's not that bad. But then in some way or form, usually the exit happens towards US.
Yeah.
Either they get acquired or they do an IPO in US. And that's a bit sad, isn't it? Or...
Yeah, I think, sad maybe, but I don't know what the actual effects of that are in terms of having capital stay here.
But I think you're a great example because you're more or less a serial entrepreneur. You've done exits before, and you stayed in Sweden, and you actually do, I think.
But I did sell the company to the US. So.
But you stayed here and invested it, right?
Yeah.
You got the capital, and you stayed in Sweden, and you kept investing here in Sweden, and that's really what we want, right?
Yeah.
So no problem that US companies come in and pay us here in Sweden as long as we stay here,
right? Yeah. So I get that question sometimes, like why didn't you start your next company in the US or in San Francisco? And why do you keep up with the taxes?
Yeah.
You can imagine doing an exit here in Sweden. There is a lot of tax you pay.
Yeah. What's your answer to that?
Yeah, I think I'm a very much a capitalist by heart. I believe strongly in market forces. But I'm also not married to money in the sense that, of course, you pay. Well, I grew up with a very Swedish mentality in that sense, I think. So, we were always, as I grew up, very skeptical on taxes, pretty right-leaning family, capitalist. And so we grew up complaining about high taxes. But at the same time, I saw my family work hard and complaining, but at the same time, not moving, right? So,
Well, pros and cons. I travel a lot to US, and I must say I strongly prefer Sweden to US. At least when you see the class differences that do exist there. And in Sweden, we have a much better welfare system, in my view, and that's worth a lot still, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I remember the Spotify founders, they wrote an article in Dagens Nyheter once, and they tried to compare a bit how to scale companies, and they compared Sweden to US. And one of the things that's said is, of course, compensation is a big problem, as you mentioned, that if you get some stock options here and it's a certain type of option, then you pay a huge amount of taxes for it, and not so in US, and that's hard by itself to motivate people why you should join the Swedish office versus the New York office in Spotify's case. The other issue was simply housing. You can get like a central place in Manhattan if you want in 2 weeks. You have to pay a lot in rent, but you can find it if you can pay for it. But not so in Sweden. Then you have to put up millions in advance, like to buy a flat. And it's super hard to find flats, right? So in that way, it caused a lot of issues, and Spotify even went out and bought flat just for onboarding purposes and had that as like a segue to get people in, because it was such a problematic situation to have people coming to Sweden. So I guess that there are these kind of issues, and but still we have so many positive things as well with finding talents. But you stayed in Sweden at least, right?
Yeah, for sure. And now in this wave now with AI, there's again a lot of software talent here, a lot of AI talent as well.
And great universities as well.
Great universities.
And a lot of exit. And wasn't it the case that Sweden, I think, is the highest in terms of number of unicorns per capita or something? So
exactly,
we're doing some things right.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. But there is like one thing when we look at kind of the Swedish heritage, right? We have kind of two parts to it. One is we have a super strong software, consumer-oriented, like with Klarna, Spotify. We have the Danish design. We have IKEA, who's famous for making Scandinavian design into every household in the world, right? So that's very like consumer-oriented. But if we look past that, earlier we actually had ABB, Electrolux, Ericsson, and a lot of and those happened like pre-internet. But we laid the foundational infrastructure for a lot of things, telephony, etc. And that we haven't seen. Where's the next Electrolux, ABB, Ericsson? I think we missed the wave of like that kind of history we have. During the last 20 years or so.
Good point.
So this is actually some of the things that motivates me. Like we need strong infrastructure as well.
And like the big tech giants that we have in US and in China, where is that in Europe and in Sweden? I guess there is not a single one close to what they are, of course.
Exactly.
Cool. Interesting discussions. But with that, very welcome here, Göran Sandahl. You're the co-founder and CEO of Opper AI that also made an exit recently. So really looking forward to continue that discussion and hearing more about that. Also like a serial entrepreneur, been working and founding companies and doing exits before. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your experience and thoughts about this topic even more. But perhaps first, you can just give a quick introduction, really. Who is Göran Sandahl, and how did you come to the position and the role at Opper that you work with today?
Sure. I'm 43, so the story has grown. So there's obviously a short and a long version. I think maybe what I've realized is that I've only worked for 3 years as an employee, but it has always felt like half of my life. But it was only 3 years.
So you just been a founder otherwise?
Yeah. Starting companies and of course, running companies, it doesn't take a year.
Yeah.
It takes 8 to 10 years at least. So that's how time flies, right? But yeah, so I'm a KDH kind of alumni. Yeah. I studied cybersecurity back in the days. So that has, in retrospect here, influenced pretty much everything I've done. But unlike maybe the conventional security folks who focus purely on security, I've taken a bit of a detour. I look at security as something that integrates into everything.
Can you just elaborate a bit more? What was your specific focus in cybersecurity? I think it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah, it was intrusion detection. So I was actually at a conference yesterday, and I met a lot of friends from back in the day. I worked as a security operations center analyst for a local company here while doing my thesis on doing intrusion detection correlation of alerts.
But without AI, I guess.
Without AI, yeah. But that's actually where the seed was born for me, because I was looking at millions of signatures being triggered across industry, like huge companies, banks, etc. And the only thing we could look at was like alerts, right? Yeah. There's like what looks like a worm on the network at that company. It looks like 40,000 viruses had triggered at that company, etc. And I realized, like, this is, number one, we're just looking at things we know. Like, these signatures are built to catch things we know. And we're not seeing everything else. We can hardly sift through all the things we see, right?
The unknown unknowns is super hard to detect, yeah.
And that was actually, the unknown unknowns was my kind of founding inspiration for Unomally, my company prior to Opper. Yeah, which was entirely a anomaly detection focused company. So the thesis was like, because I was working in industry after that for 3 years, like trying to work with the bleeding edge technology for intrusion detection. And I needed to go into consultancy to be able to play with the most expensive technology in that domain. Like, what are the banks and defense actually buying? Mostly signature-based things. Yeah, so I realized, like, there's no technology. Yeah. There's no technology for us to detect things we haven't pinpointed yet to be a problem. Yeah. So, I had since university started sketching out, like, what would a detection of these things we don't know about yet actually look like. So Unomally was founded on the concept of the biggest source of highly detailed data we have in our infrastructures is log data. And the reason why people don't use it proactively is because they can't sift through it.
Yeah, like, it's too much, right?
Yeah, it's like trillions of logs per day. Yeah. It can be. So there's no way of, sifting through that. Yeah. So you maybe use it in forensics or root cause analysis, because then you have a time.
And then it's afterwards, right?
Yeah, afterwards, yeah. So we invented this technology, which ended up being patented and all of that, to basically learn these patterns in real time and detect anomalies in these log streams in real time. And anomalies in log data is like shift of frequencies of a certain log line, detection of completely new log lines. Imagine a segmentation fault, or somebody puts in a USB memory in a server that has never happened before. But also shifting parameters. So there's a lot of patterns in logs, even though they look completely random. There's like certain things that are always changing, like sequence numbers and timestamps. But other things are very static.
So sift out those that are volatile, but really to find the stuff that is not volatile. And when that happens, then
so then we basically were able to tag the degree of difference that individual log lines have within a couple of microseconds. So we could build a rich data set and plot that right in a graph and on a map.
And today, of course, you will speak more about Opper shortly, but you're into the latest kind of AI techniques here as well. What do you think about the latest technique in cybersecurity today then? Do you work anything with that today, or is it, you do?
No, actually, not.
But I'm sure you're following the field a bit here, and I know a lot of course, companies, especially Google, Microsoft, and others, are heavily using AI for cybersecurity purposes. But so are cyber criminals in some way.
Yeah.
So in some way, I see it as like a war between, the cyber security experts versus the cyber criminals in some way, and who can use AI the most. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, for sure. That has always been the case. If you're exploit developer or an intrusion detector like it's an arms race, right? And I haven't thought about all these, theoretical frameworks for economy and these things for a long time. But what we do, what I meant with that has influenced everything I do, there is a great portion of like control and control systems theory in what we're doing at Opper as well. Yeah. And I was saying I was at this conference yesterday, and I met a bunch of old friends, and I watched a talk prior to being on a panel, which was around prompt injection, right? Yeah. And he was super talented guy who his job is to, make models not do what they're supposed to do.
Oh, okay. So bad actors.
Yeah, exactly. So it's his job, right, to go in and break the chatbot, make it leak information, make it do tool calls that it shouldn't do. And he was explaining that, and that the typical similarity that people do is like prompt injection is like SQL injection, meaning you're trying to hide some malicious code inside a statement. But he was arguing that it's more password cracking. So it's more actually because you have no idea how the system looks behind. With SQL, you know that there's a database, but you don't know how the LLMs actually...
Right. So because it's a huge model with billions of parameters in it, it's really hard to do the same type of injection, I guess.
Yeah, so more the techniques around similarity to password cracking, where you're like testing patterns, you're like mutating patterns of inputs and trying to understand the system by these techniques of fuzzing and things like that. But it was fairly eye-opening, actually. I haven't followed that field very closely, but that's when I also realized that a lot of the things we do at Opper is around, putting controls around these models.
I'm so tempted to continue this discussion because I think cybersecurity is so fascinating. But let's try to avoid it for now. And please, if you could, how did you get started with Opper?
Yeah, so after we sold Unomely, straight before, like it was in January 2020, and COVID hit, March or so, 2020. And then I ended up staying at the buyer for about 3 years almost. I experienced life and renovated the house and all of that. But
were you locked in at the one?
Yeah, for 18 months, but ended up staying a little bit longer, helping the company acquire other companies and helping those companies be integrated, etc. But so then, of course, GPT-3 happened and a lot of that. So I started to tinker as everybody did. And a lot of the inspiration, what motivated me with Unomely was software is increasingly being a major part in our lives. Like before, when we started Unomely 2012.
Oh, that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't like containers, ephemeral compute, none of that was really happening then yet. So everything was fairly static. Yeah. So the inspiration was always like it's going to get crazier and crazier with software. So you're going to need more and more anomaly detection. Yeah. It's going to be harder and harder to understand these systems. So obviously then when I saw large language models being so capable and understanding the scaling laws, I saw that this is going to be, now it's going to be accelerating even more. And it's not that we're even going to understand which code we're running. Yeah. This code is going to mutate. Right. And
we haven't written the code either. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of that made me, again, become very inspired by, okay, so what does this look like in a world where we have agents?
But when you started it, I mean, it's one thing where AI is today and more and more becoming, reasoning and agentic in some ways. But at that time, in I guess 2022-ish, and then 3.5 happened in November, I think.
Yeah.
But at that time, what made you say that you needed a company like Opper? What was the problem you were seeing that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so I had a personal, I had a theoretical framework around, how's this? If the scaling laws hold true, where's this gonna end up? So that was like a theoretical, and then I had a personal one as well. I was tinkering, I was building, like everybody did, a recipe app. Yeah. And one of the problems I was faced with is how hard it is to make these AI models repeat the same task over and over.
Right.
So, for example, I wanted to, have the image look like the same, even despite the dish, right? So it should always be a black table, for instance.
Right.
So, and the text of the recipe should always look the same. So that was like my personal, like how hard it is to make these models be consistent on a certain task. So that's when I realized, okay, so there's a lot of scaffolding around making these models actually do a task repeatedly over and over. And if I have this problem for myself, and if I try something for 10 times, 2 or 3 times it doesn't come out good, this must be a problem that happens at a greater scale as well. So that was kind of the personal idea of, okay, so we need scaffolding around making models repeatedly do something with high degree of reliability. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess for me as a builder. So that was, I think, a personal thing which made me start thinking about what is that scaffolding, and that's where we.
How do you define scaffolding? By the way, it's such a common term these days, but I think few people have a good sense of what it means.
I see a picture in front of me, just like building things surrounding a construction site, right? Just keep while the concrete is brewing, there is like things around it that makes it stay into shape until it's kind of done.
Because I think sometimes I get a bit annoyed with the term scaffolding because it sounds from the original definition more like it's a temporary structure in some sense. That's not supposed to be the main thing. It's just a temporary fix. But in reality, I think the scaffolding around LLMs today is not a small thing. I mean, that can sometimes be what makes it or break it in some sense. So for me, at least, it could be almost the core with the logic around the LLM. Do you see what I mean? Or would you
I see what you mean, but I actually think it's a fitting term.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because nobody, when building a agent or a chatbot, thinks that, that like parse JSON and validate JSON out of a model is anything but a temporary thing. Like the model should be able to do these things. So we kind of implement all kinds of things, not like choosing, we can't choose, right? We just have to do it to keep the model doing what we're expecting so our application works. So I think a lot of these things that we do when building with LLMs is seen as temporary. The models will improve. At some point, this will not be a problem.
But it's still the USP, right? I mean, the USP is not the model itself. No. It's really the way that you operate with it. The scaffolding is the USP. Wouldn't you say so?
I think that's maybe what is a common. So we meet a lot of startups, and it's a common, thought, right? That it is this scaffolding that is the moat, right? Because if and I was actually watching in Paris. I was in Paris watching the Intercom founder, Des Traynor, and he was speaking about. He got a question from the audience: what if the models improve? And is that good or bad? And he said it's bad, because that means that everybody can do these things. So there is a large sentiment around, because they're difficult to build with, there is moat associated with this. But actually, I think the long-term moat is context, engineering the right data to feed these models, building that data flywheel, building feedback loops. That's where the real moat is.
But feedback loops, isn't that scaffolding?
Yeah, of course, there is scaffolding involved with getting that signal into the model.
This is such an interesting topic. I think I'll add it to the list to just speak a bit more about this. I like a comment from Sam Altman here, and he said basically that any startup that is not impacted poorly by an improved AI model is a good startup. Would you agree with that, or what do you think about that statement?
Yeah. So the statement is you should benefit from model development.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have if you're exploiting the weaknesses of the current model only. Yeah. I think that's true. But I'm not 100% sure what it means, because so the other, my personal view and intuition around these models, since they're like next token predictor, at least if we look at transformers, is that it's not certain that just because models improve in parameter count or that the scaling laws naturally needs to mean that the models will get better at doing my tasks. So the analogy I sometimes have, which is maybe a poor one, but is like if you would ask Einstein for how to mow your lawn, right? You might not get an instruction you can follow. So increasing intelligence means that there's more pathways for the model to solve the problem, which might end up in a actually more tricky ability to steer it. So I think there's always going to be problems with these models, even if they increase in capabilities.
Yeah, I add this as a topic because I think it's super interesting, and I know that you have worked so much with them. So, and I think a lot of people are interested in how should they get the USP, how should they have the value add, so to speak, in an organization so that it can scale in the future. Yeah, super interesting one. But perhaps you can just get back to Opper a bit. So can you just go back a bit, what was the mission and vision of Opper, and how did that journey turn out?
So we wanted to create something that could steer these models better, make them repeatable. Yeah. And we understood then that that means largely that it has to do with prompting these models effectively. Yeah. So we got some inspiration from what other kind of proxy technologies exists, like what inspiration can we take from other previous technologies. And we found SaaS providers like Twilio and Stripe, who also has these kind of proxy systems that integrate solve a lot of complexities, but provide a really simple surface. So sometimes I say we're trying to build a Stripe for AI, not by processing payments, but tokens. But we want the experience to be something similar, that as a developer, I shouldn't have to master credit card protocols just to be able to transact payments with credit cards. And similarly here, a lot of the tricks we need to do with models might be temporary. And what if we could obfuscate that and actually handle that in sort of like a middle layer, so that the developers can get a stable endpoint, which we've chosen to call a task completion API, which is heavily spec-based. You specify both input and output schemas, so you can embody a lot of requirements on both input data that can act as guardrails and similar on the inputs to a function or to a model, but also output schema, meaning how do I want this data back so that I can use it in my application.
Cool. And just to see if I rephrase it in my own terms here, it sounds like you're trying to raise the abstraction level a bit compared to the normal completion APIs or response APIs, etc. that you have. You want to have a high level of task completion APIs that that focus more on the more objective or a task that you want to have by having these kind of specifications for the input and output, and then you add the logic necessary to work with different type of models. Would that be fair?
Yeah, we integrate with pretty much all the providers and open source models. And basically the way to see it is that the art, so to speak, of making the model do this task, and that might be parsing a receipt, or it might be an agent doing a tool call with a trajectory and a goal in mind. So it could be pretty much any kind of task, but to make that repeatedly better, and make it fairly model independent. So in my code, in my agent, I can have one task specification, and the art of making the model complete that is this prompt engineering exercise, which we've learned by now is different model for model. It is, what is shown, you can influence this a lot by actually building the prompt basically for every request. So techniques like few shot prompting, where you move in examples that are very similar to the current input you're having, can greatly enhance, can make a small model actually perform to the level of a big model. So a lot of these techniques, which is around how do we construct the perfect prompt given my current input, is what we help with. And we guarantee then the delivery of a completion to that specification. Now that can be wrong, the specification, but we deliver the completion. And if we can't get the model to complete that request, we give a graceful, very deterministic error, rather than providing here you go, but I've added some text above, or here is your something that looks like the correct JSON schema. It is a perfect JSON schema, but it's one key wrong, or that the fields or the values in that is not correct.
And get so tempted to ask, what is your secret recipe here? But I know it's a part of your IP, so you probably won't share all the details here.
But actually, to that point, it's an open system. So we don't do, magic sauce in the sense, like this is a way scaffolding. So we productify this scaffolding and try to commoditize it, so that you can get access to this. So things like retries, right? How many times should you retry a generation? Validating a JSON. Why should everybody implement that? Or why do you need an SDK or a framework to do that? So we do a lot of these things, and we do some more advanced things as well. But none of these are secret sauce. We actually are very transparent with, in the platform, how these models are prompted. So you can see that. But of course, so what the value we're trying to provide is that to do this so that developers can focus on this differentiated work, which is context engineering. How do I connect my databases with MCP? How do I feed the right tools into the system?
Perhaps we need to just explain what context engineering versus prompt engineering is. How would you differentiate the two?
I would say prompt, so I haven't thought about this very hard, but my instinct tells me that prompt engineering is, you try to come up with the perfect way of expressing the task in typically human language on the model's terms. So I need to understand how this model is going to react to XML, or that is prompt engineering. So that those tokens that's supposed to activate the neural network in the right way, so I get the right JSON out. That is prompt engineering. Context engineering I see as kind of the precursor. So if you imagine that you want to feed a bunch of variables into a prompt, those variables, that content, that is context engineering. So that could be, for instance, could be tools. Prompt engineering with tools is, okay, how do I put this in the prompt? But it could also be, context of a user. For instance, if you have a chatbot, what is the user information? So the context engineering is like, what are all the information that I can assemble that will make this agent, help this agent be as efficient as possible to solving this task. And that is pulling data from systems. But the prompt engineering exercise is when you put more emphasis on how do I put this in the prompt to the model with this string.
I heard Anthropic speak a bit about this recently, and they said something. Prompt engineering is, more specifically how do I make this prompt work, so to speak. But context is more generalized, saying you have a session where you need to continue the discussion in some ways, and then if you have like a long session of prompts that happens, you can't just append or concatenate all the prompts together. You need to have some smart way to just engineer them together and compress it, but still have some memory. And there's a lot of these kind of very difficult things that you need to consider to have a long-term kind of session or context.
Yeah,
which is difficult, I guess.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of developments that are actually implementations of good context engineering, which is labeled like agents and sub-agents. So why do you need a sub-agent? It's typically actually for managing context. So let's say you have a task that takes a long time and will in total have many iterations, maybe 50 iterations, 100 tokens per iteration. Like parsing a website, if you dump a website like Opper AI, that'll be 25,000 characters because it's a JavaScript and all kinds of things.
Or probably tokens, right? I mean, I think it's
tokens is even more. Yeah. But if you just put that into the context window as a response, that will be just fill up that 124,000 character, or very quickly, maybe close to 1 million. If you have multiple iterations. So like sub-agents, for instance, is a way of splitting up the agent's task. So you can spin off sub-agents that has its own context window of 1 million, right? And once it finishes, it can return and fill the context window of the parent agent with just here's the request and here was the result. Right. Either an error or that clean website extraction.
So you have some specialized agent that can do some things very well, and then you need to combine them and orchestrate them. What I have to ask this stupid question. I'm sorry in advance, but how do you define an agent?
For me, it's using an LLM to choose between actions to take on the path towards some goal.
I like it. I like the term choose action.
Yeah.
I think it's a key term. If you just program exactly the scaffolding, do this step and that step and that step.
It's a pipeline.
Yeah, it's a workflow or pipeline, right?
Yeah.
But if the agent can actually choose what the step should be, then it starts to become more of an agent.
I think so as well.
I guess it's a spectrum anyway. I mean, I heard Andrew Ng speak about this, and he got the question, but I hate that question. Why don't we simply say agent is some level of autonomy, where some agents are very little autonomy and they are following some kind of instructions, but others are very highly autonomous. And they are more agentic, I guess.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's
I think it's pretty straightforward. People get a little bit caught up in semantics, but you want to allow the LLM to steer, right? Yeah. That's, I think, the key. And that's what's exciting about that with agents is the ability to solve problems by just giving it tools.
Can we just, because I hear, so many people abuse the term agent, and I think, if you just use an LLM to write an email or to write an article in some way, but there is no decision or no action or that's being decided on, that is a very poor definition of an agent. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Good. Then I can say that with confidence.
Yeah. So if there's no action taken,
it's just a prompt and a single output, and that's it. Then it's hard to call that.
We're having a debate about this internally as well. So you can imagine, are we a platform? Are we a platform for building agentic software? But you can argue nobody cares, right? Everything is an agent. So we're a platform for building agents.
Yeah, but if you say everything is an agent, then I think it also removes some of the true value that we could have.
For sure.
I 100% proper agentic systems.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Anyway, so many people abuse that term, as many other terms like what AI is really and so forth.
Yeah.
That seems to be the reality of AI in some way.
Yeah. But so to finish off this long-winded story of Opper, so this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to build this, what we call reliable primitive. Because one of the problems that we see still is that the symptoms of an unreliable model interaction are this heavy emphasis on evals. It is the numbers we're seeing on failed AI projects. It is the explosion of tools for observability, prompt stores, frameworks. Many of those are because we just can't rely on the model to respond like we told it to.
Right.
So that's kind of the core idea behind Opper is like, what if we could provide that primitive that have a higher degree of reliability in completing, or at least if not completing, and doing all the retries, all the techniques, giving a very graceful, deterministic error, so you can manage that gracefully in your application.
So reliable and trustworthy AI. Or LLMs.
Yeah.
Or agents as well, perhaps.
Yeah, that's what you build. So we believe this is a primitive that works, or we know it's a primitive that works if all you're doing is parsing a PDF and extracting structured information or like decoding, transcribing an audio file, and you want it very structured, looking at the same way, but it's that lone call. You're building a... So there is a big difference in just requirements, I would say. Like if you look at startups, it's like a little bit of a race. Can we get it to work? And then we'll fix it later. Like reliability is a later problem. First we need the demo. First we need a prototype. Then we need the demo. Preferably a demo that works on stage. Then we need... Once we get users, we see the problems, then we're going to fix it. But the enterprise is coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, right? They first want to understand that it's feasible. And there's like governance and compliance and security. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that, like a flipped way of adopting technology. So I think that is a big difference. But then... So one of the things that we believe strongly is that we haven't actually seen any of the value that we're going to be seeing for AI yet. Most, so I would say we're like 1% of the value.
Capabilities, or do you mean in terms of business value for enterprises?
Business value. Not a very, very important role, because you can't like babysit model choice or prompts. You can do that when you have 1 to 3 applications. But you can't do that if you have 50 to 150 agents. Yeah. So that's really where this primitive, we think, makes the most sense. So we're very bullish on kind of that autonomous agent track.
Cool. And I know you have a lot of traceability functionality and things like that, so you can actually understand what's happening. Yeah, which I think is super important for enterprises as well, right?
Yeah, there is a stack above or underneath, depending on how you look at it. But the platform starts with this task completion API. Then you get visibility, you get evals, you get the ability to test alternative model on that task. So there's quite a broad spectrum of helpful features as well.
Cool. I'd love to jump to perhaps one of the more exciting topics, which is the recent acquisition done by FinetuneDB. Can you just start to describe a bit, how did that come to happen, and what's the future here now for Opper AI?
Yeah, so we met on Felix and Farouk, probably 1.5 years ago, and we've always been, very fond of what each of us are doing.
Can you just describe a bit what FinetuneDB is?
Yeah, so FinetuneDB, we're building basically a fine-tuning platform. So building custom LLMs.
Yeah.
And obviously, people that founded companies 2 years ago have seen rapid progress, especially from the model labs. If you look at Opper AI, for instance, they have fine-tuning now in the platform.
In the API.
In the API for their models only.
Yeah.
So when we started talking, and again, back to this, how do we build a really strong infrastructure, the Ericsson of 2025, right? Or this AI wave. That's our vision, really. We want to build a strong infrastructure company. And there's not many people doing that. So obviously there was a attraction in that way. Like, how can we kind of combine and be stronger in that sense? Does it make sense? We realized we didn't have a ton of overlap. We have the very shared vision, where we both want to, make the most out of this wonderful technology. And so that's kind of where we aligned very well. And the idea is, we're very bullish on, again, back to this repetitive nature. So many agents will do the same thing over and over. And why should you use a Sonnet 4 or a 500 billion model when in theory you can start accumulating a lot of data on that trajectory? So the goal here is and we're already now accumulating these data sets for these tasks. And we're using those for a few shot prompting, meaning we're injecting that into the prompt and making small models perform on these tasks only what larger models could otherwise do in a 0-shot setting.
I see.
But that same data set can be used for fine-tuning. So once you have a stable agent, back to this reliability thing, how do you avoid... We actually have a customer now that has to move over from Sonnet 3.5, which is deprecated on Anthropic's public API, it's deprecated on GCP, but it's not deprecated on AWS. On Bedrock.
Sonnet, for people know, that's one of the Claude models from Anthropic, right? Yes.
So how do you... Imagine you have many of these agents and the model deprecates, right? How do you manage that?
You need an abstraction layer, I guess.
Yeah. So if you can actually fine-tune a model that is small enough to run on cheap GPUs or even CPUs for a very deterministic use case, you can solve some of those longevity problems for agents.
But does fine-tune also support, fine-tuning through the API, or is it mainly for open source model that you can download and fine-tune?
It is actually mostly for proprietary models. So what they were doing was basically building a data set manager, making it easier to manage the life cycle of fine-tuning models.
Interesting.
But I think what we're very interested in is actually seeing if we can train open source models. So basically a task has an associated model, very custom for that use case. But that requires that the models can be around the 1 billion parameter. So you can basically run it as a CPU on a CPU. Otherwise, it becomes problematic to scale that. You don't want to share that model with other companies, right? Because it's highly then trained on your data.
Yeah. Okay, so fine-tune gives the ability to adapt models to the use case you want, and then Opper provides a reliable way to do deterministic and reliable, I guess, predictions in some sense.
Yeah.
Is that how to...
Yeah, we're gonna be integrating part of that technology and also rebuilding. They're also influencing how we build because we have...
How big is FinetuneDB?
They're just 2 people, so and we were 6, so we're 8 now. We're not a big company per se, but we're building this, building towards this very clear vision, where we want, again, the the data sets to automatically be created, be utilized as few-shot prompting to see that you can get that last 10% of repeatability, reliability in the models, and then use that same data set to offload into fine-tuning a model. And then you would have the best, in theory, price performance, and you can move on to the next use case. And we want to make that as smooth of a process as possible.
Super interesting. So what's happening next? How will you start to integrate the two products and people and the company, so to speak?
Yeah, it's not a difficult merger or anything. We knew each other, and we're already working together now. And
okay.
So, but how this is gonna show more in near term is that we're investing heavily in this kind of reinforcement idea that how do we remove the focus of prompts, like prompt engineering is dead. Reinforcement learning through running feedback is the future. That's our thought, at least, that we want to collect feedback from the environment on how this task completes and let that drive data set creation. And that there is where we're investing very heavily right now.
That was a strong statement. I need to reflect on that. Okay, so prompt engineering is dead and fine-tuning or reinforcement learning is the new way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and specifically this running feedback. It's sort of reinforcement learning with human feedback. That is where we've been. But what we're looking at now is, and I don't have any secret information or anything about it, but we're looking at Opper AI, what they're doing with Codex, for instance, in the Codex CLI, very clearly doing reinforcement learning for a specific domain, coding in that sense. So there is and they bought this company, the name escapes me, but Signal, it's like a data signal monitoring, measuring company.
Yeah.
And so very clearly they want to optimize the models for task, long trajectory task completion. So I think that's where and you can see Gemini doing the same with Gemini CLI. You can see Claude doing the same with Claude. You can see XAI doing the same with Grok CLI. So I think that is a pretty strong signal that these general capabilities makes the models quite noisy and hard to actually steer. So you have to reinforce the task that you want them to do. So that leaves a very open question. Like, how do we optimize these models for domains that nobody else has access to?
Right.
So let's say you're a fintech company or you're a logistics company. You want to optimize this model for your logistical flow. Are you supposed to wait until or give away the data to one of these providers? Or is there actually a path to train your own model and function to do that? We think that that's a big opportunity. But the flip side would be, can I prompt my way to success for this logistical robot that I'm about to build? And I think that's been proven to be impossible to get the reliability we need.
Let me just reflect on that a bit. Impossible is a strong word.
Yeah.
But I guess what one could say is that if you just want to rely on prompting, you would need a big model to start with, and that would be very expensive, and perhaps you need to always run through the API because it's proprietary. But then if you were to fine-tune it, you can perhaps get away with a much smaller model that is both cheaper, faster, and perhaps more accurate as well.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I think so if we look at Linux, right? So what runs infrastructure today? Everything that we don't need to care about, it's on open technology. It's commodity hardware in a way, but beefy ones. But
I
largely
see an open source question topic coming up soon. But okay, good.
And there is like open source operating systems And I don't think it's necessarily for like anti-proprietary views when building infrastructure. It's just that we need this to be, we don't patch this every day. We need this to be able to run 25 years, if so need be. That is the nature of infrastructure. So from that sense, I think my view is that we're going to have frontier models for consumer use cases and scientific research. So consumer use case being games, videos, generative gaming, generative video, generative entertainment. And of course, curing cancer and these things. But for, our average, for our agents that is running in our business and repeats the same thing, that is super complicated. We actually have open source models that are capable of doing that today.
We have in this podcast been discussing these kind of questions about open source versus proprietary and what will happen with the frontier models going forward if we just think a couple of years ahead. So if I were to just throw that at you and see what you think about this. So one hypothesis that we have is that there will be a few companies in US and in China primarily that will continue to scale models and have these kind of super huge trillion parameter models that costs whatever to train and even to run inference on. But it will be very few of them, and it will be only a few set of companies that have the money to both train and operate on them. So in practice, they won't be very useful. And then even for OpenAI that is having the GPT-5 mini and other models that is used more and more, and they try to find a more sustainable from an economical point of view to run it, to potentially, if we think whatever kind of average company in the world, they can't run the biggest model, especially if it's 20 trillion like GPT-5 4.5 was. I mean, it's completely impossible. So there may be a future with a few set of really, really big models, which can potentially be distilled into smaller models. And then there will be a huge number of these kind of like thousands or millions of these kind of SMLs or small SLMs, small language models. That is actually very accurate, that is very affordable, and that is really fast. And they will be the main use case. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. So I think that's...
And we're seeing that already. Yeah. Like the, now not so new, but the OpenAI's GPT-OS 120B and 20B. Amazing models. For driving the agentic engine. Terrible at Swedish, for instance. So it's not a chatbot model. But and it has fairly weak context lengths. So again, you need to pair that with good context engineering. But it's a fantastic model.
I was playing around a lot with Gemma 1B model, just 1 billion parameters, super small. And if you just use it properly, it's surprisingly good.
Yeah. Yeah, so the scaling laws in a way, I think is not gonna, like we're not gonna, like these models are so good that it's hard to tell how they can be better. I think it's largely about taste. You saw when OpenAI pulled GPT-4o and people were crying, right? Just because it has an identity. So I think there's a lot of fine-tuning on the personality of the model.
Just to challenge a bit, I mean, I think for knowledge tasks, like just being able to take a large amount of information and just being able to work with that, then I think we have reached the point of diminishing returns. But when it comes to reasoning and more agentic tasks, I think there is still a lot of room to improve them. So it depends, I guess, what kind of capability you're thinking of. But for pure, like, can you answer this kind of question task? I think we're saturating most of the benchmarks, but there are still these kind of ArcAGI2 benchmarks that is, even if you have the biggest model, they wouldn't be able to solve them, and they're lacking reasoning capabilities. So there are still some different type of capabilities that is missing potentially, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think maybe sometimes we're kind of confusing. So these models have a very high bar, like they're Olympiad math, right? But they also can't count.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I'm not saying strawberry counting number of R's, because that's a tokenization. Like that's understandable why they can't do that.
Exactly.
But I'm meaning, so we have, if you go into Opper AI/models, we have benchmarks where we have our own evals around models and how they perform across different sets of categories. So that is, for instance, context retrieval or context work. It is agentic features. It is SQL, for instance. And it is like normalization tasks. Like, can it structure the same information over and over? And the purpose of this benchmark, it's about 30 questions in each category. The purpose of this is not to be another humanities last exam. This is literally tasks that you can go in and look at, actually click through and look at. These are tasks that any human could do. An example is like a journal, like an ordinary travel journal, right?
Okay.
And one of the tests is, how many cities did Maria visit? And some models, even the frontier models, doesn't answer 16. They answer 12. And sometimes they answer 16.
But isn't that a perfect example of, if it's a simple like fact retrieval kind of question, they usually perform really well. But as soon as they have to reason and pull things together, they usually perform much less.
Yeah, and maybe not usually, but sometimes. And this is what makes it so difficult to build with these models. Because one time it can work beautifully well, and another time it just flips and do something completely wrong. And we have so little, trust. I mean, it's so easy to lose that trust, right? So I can't just one-shot this model to do this task.
I heard this kind of interesting quote, and getting into a rabbit hole here, but I think it's interesting. And if you take, it's super hard, I would argue, to differentiate when you just look at a human or an AI to see if it was knowledge capability or reasoning capabilities. So as an example, if you're playing chess and you look at the human, Magnus Carlsen in Norway, who is the world champion for many, many years, he has an awesome memory. He can basically recall games like 20 years ago, and after 4 moves, he can say, it's this game with these people. I mean, he has amazing memory. But he also has amazing reasoning capabilities, and he can think a number of steps ahead, of course. But I would argue that it's super hard to, just by observing how a human or an AI acts, to say if it was memory recall or actually if they did reason a number of steps back and forth. Even to the point, it's like comparing gravity versus acceleration and the general theory of relativity that basically says it is impossible to differentiate them. I would say it's also more or less impossible to differentiate memory recall versus reasoning if you just look externally. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think models we get a bit fooled because models have such an amazing memory recall. And they are trained on all of the internet. And sometimes if you have a reasoning task, something kind of multiplicating 2 numbers or whatever, they found some kind of similar kind of, these steps has been done in similar kind of situations. So they have like a reasoning template that they can find.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And then you just deploy it. So then it's still a lot of memory recall and some reasoning, of course, but still you can get away with a lot of surprisingly intellectual tasks by just having amazing memory.
Yeah, and that is what I think, like the reasoning traces, training on reasoning traces is where a lot of the energy has been spent.
Cool. That was a rabbit hole, but interesting to discuss with such a knowledgeable person as yourself. So cool. I like to get into one of the topics we've been touching upon, which is open source. And I heard you had some thoughts about that. Now, let me just give some kind of opening, and then please disagree with me if you can. So I've been arguing for a long time that open source will go down. I think you think the opposite. So this is interesting discussion here. So I think, in some way, for a security point of view, but also from an economical point of view, the largest frontier models will stop being open sourced. of course, OpenAI has done that for a long time. I think even Meta, the largest Llama 4 behemoth model, is not open sourced yet. They even start to do closed models them as well. Even Anthropic, who is supposed to be more open, have also models that is closed. If we take Grok and Elon, who claimed, he wanted really, he started OpenAI in the pursuit of having open models. He actually started to not also open source some models, only the second to last model. So the latest one can't really be open source because it would be copied directly by someone else. So that removes the IP advantage. So I would argue that at least the frontier biggest models will stop being open sourced, and they more or less have, I would argue. But then of course we can have smaller SLM models, and they can be easily open sourced. But I think even the biggest open source proponents in the world will stop releasing the biggest models. What do you think?
Yeah, that I agree with.
Now it wasn't a challenge.
But I don't think it matters.
Okay.
So
what do you mean?
Because I think so why are we doing this from the beginning? Like, why is AI even a good thing for us, right? And I think it's there is an element of us being more knowledgeable. Fantastic technology for that. It is going to be fantastic entertainment. It's going to cure cancer. All these wonderful things.
Yes.
But there's also the element of all the tedious things we do on a daily basis called work, which is where I think the biggest value is actually going to be created.
Okay.
It's going to move us to be more creative people that can spend more time on that layer, which I think will be a frontier model kind of layer. So if you look at game development, for instance, imagine how much resources is gonna. I know XAI is putting a lot of resources into that, like world models that you can work around in and all of that. That's gonna take tremendous amount of compute to power that and cancer research, protein folding, exploring the stars, mathematical theorems, etc. But for the general kind of value creation, meaning what is the cost of us running this business or me creating a trip with my friends? That is not going to solve through a frontier model. We're very close to having SLMs be able to power that agent that can engage with me in WhatsApp with my friends.
Right. So SLM,
or in a business to integrate with Confluence and SharePoint and pulling the information and putting it somewhere else. And
I don't think we defined SLM, but instead of large language model LLMs, SLMs is small language models in some sense. But these kind of SLMs are getting so powerful. So they, if I understand you correctly, can handle the majority of tasks going forward, right?
Yeah, I don't know actually what's the definition of an SLM versus an LLM. So I don't know where if it's 3 billion, 7 billion, 1 billion, or maybe it's like 100 million. I actually don't know what the definition of an SLM, but I think the trend is very clear that nobody could have imagined that a 120 billion model could do what it can do today, a year ago. Yeah. It is astounding the developments in capabilities and compressing intelligence down.
Which is a good thing, right?
For sure.
Because, the extreme investments in these kind of data centers being done, there's very few players that can do that. And if we were to continue that trend, it will be an extreme concentration of power to a few selected companies. Yeah. But I guess with SLMs becoming more and more powerful, more and more companies can start to do that. Right?
Yeah.
So that opens up another question for me. And I have I'm trying to say this in a non-too leading question kind of way. Okay. See if I succeed. But there's been, a lot of movements. Europe, of course, is trailing behind in the frontier AI lab kind of sense, and we don't have a strong tech giant that can drive the latest LLMs. Mistral is trying. It's not to the same extent, as the biggest one, but still, it's not that bad. So, what would you say is most useful for Europe or Sweden to invest in? Either we can spend a lot of money building the new LLMs, the frontier models, or we can spend time finding these SLM models that otherwise can be used. What would you, if you were a politician or policymaker, choose to invest in?
Yeah, I think this is a difficult because you kind of have to take the very doom or gloom position.
Do you? Why?
Because why? So investment for this, like, what is an investment? It is,
imagine you were the
pay
prime minister,
something for an outcome.
You're now the Ursula in Europe, or Ulf Kristersson in Sweden, and you have to decide. You're going to invest this much in building a new LLM or frontier model for Sweden or Europe, or you're going to do more investment in building SLMs. What would you choose?
Yeah, I think I don't believe in I think there's a general problem in Europe that we're thinking about it from a top-down perspective. So we have $1 billion here, the market, or let's find a way to place it well. And it's a very bureaucratic process, and it never ends up in the right pockets. Whereas the American way, or the more bottoms-up way, is much more effective in this, in my belief, which is like a team of people, friends, have an idea, prove a theorem, and go for it, right? And raise capital on that journey by incrementally getting bigger and bigger proof. And talented entrepreneurs can raise maybe money for a bet on a grassroots level. So I think it's sad that it's only Mistral in Europe that has managed to kind of walk that bottoms-up path in a way. And haven't been able to maybe raise enough capital to really be a Anthropic or now there is an insane amount of money in that. So, but China has been able to do it. So it shouldn't be impossible. But now the question is, like, maybe it's a little bit late to train a foundational model versus like looking at fine-tuning. Obviously, we need language support.
So
I was speaking
about,
you
can fine-tune that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's unclear to me actually what a year ago I was very opinionated on this, that we just need a foundational model. I actually think that since the scaling laws are, it's looking a little bit shaky, that there's a ton of value in the models that we already got. I actually think we have most of the majority of the training that these models will have to go through to produce economic value has happened. So we need to find ways of actually deploying these in a good way with agents and things like that. But that means that there is already open source models that are very capable. And then the question becomes, okay, if that's already available and they're open ways, meaning we can fine tune them or do things, what is the point of training another one?
One argument I've heard is we need the knowledge to know how to train a foundational model.
That's a good point.
Maybe. I'm trying not to be leading here. But then you could try to say, okay, what is the most difficult thing? To build a foundational model or to fine-tune a model to do what you need it to do? And okay, let me stop being...
Yeah, I actually have no idea what's... I would guess, well, it's much harder to train a foundational model. It's like... so expensive to do something wrong.
But expensive is one thing, but just having the knowledge. I mean, there is a lot of information, and we know China has published a lot. Meta has published how they do it exactly. They have exact like logs of how they train their models, etc. So there is a lot of information, I would argue, in how to build a foundation model. It's just it's super expensive and takes a lot of time and resources.
Yeah, but that's intertwined, right? So imagine having a cluster of 100,000 GPUs, and you can count the cost per minute of you not using them well for training. Like there's a lot of pressure in that, so you would need.
But then it's not a knowledge gap, right? It's the resource gap, or
well, somebody says that there's like 25 people on the earth who can train a foundational model. Given how complicated it is to, like, there's a lot of intuition in knowing, because you have to have an intuition on, will this, model train well, because you won't be able to see that it didn't train well for quite some time, and then you already burned through.
Yeah, but you can adapt it.
Hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
But if it's like this, then there are, for fine-tuning, there are so many new techniques to use. Of course, reinforcement learning through human feedback is one, but you have a plethora of different approaches with reinforcement learning with verifiable results, and even supervised fine-tuning and a lot of other techniques. So the number of different approaches to do fine-tuning, I would say, is much more than the number of techniques to do pre-training.
Yeah. So you mean that's a challenge in itself to pick the right?
If I simply I want as a company X to have the most value for the buck in the least amount of resources, it's very easy for me what to do. I wouldn't spend the money on building a foundational model. I would, take a model that is pre-trained and then fine-tune it.
Yeah.
That would be most valuable for a company.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, in my view, right? So if that's the case, and we want to, perhaps not be the leading frontier AI lab in Sweden and Europe, but simply find the best value for it for Swedish society and companies, then the choice would be simple.
Yeah, that's what I mean with doom and gloom. If everything is fine and dandy, we just need a little bit better Swedish language and no data leakage to anybody else.
Company-specific task, like your kind of task-specific, objective that you want to have. And that is what companies normally need.
Yeah.
And if that's what they need, that is, from a engineering point, but you should start focusing on it and see what you need to achieve it.
Yeah, but so that's the doomy version of this.
Okay.
Which is that Europe need a supply chain, right? Yeah. So imagine, the question is, do we need the frontier level entertainment? So what is a luxury society versus a non-luxury society? Entertainment is one such factor. Yeah. It is access to healthcare. So what does healthcare look like in 10 years, right?
But even AlphaFold, etc., they didn't use, the biggest foundational model. They had special trained, small models, right? So I think otherwise it would be too expensive to use it.
Yeah. So the only case I can make for being a little bit doomy here is that, we're not going to be able, as a continent, to have access to equal healthcare, entertainment, and healthcare is like cancer treatment, for instance.
But don't you think we can have SLMs
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And that's my thesis, is that that's really where a lot of this compute is going to go. So that's the doomy version. That we're
because I'm going to just continue the argument here. I think it's so interesting. But if we take coding as an example, we can say that AI for coding is actually working surprisingly well right today. But the way it's working is not by having a super big model doing everything in a single shot. I mean, it's really a more agentic approach with multiple steps, different agents doing different tasks, and together they are like an orchestration of different, like an agentic system that is doing the coding for you. Wouldn't that be, if you want to do like cancer research, for example, also the best approach? To, instead of having a single huge model, to instead have more specialized model working together to achieve the greater good, so to speak.
Maybe. that might be the case. You might be absolutely right there. So definitely, if this is a context issue, I would wholeheartedly agree. One of the properties of like agents is that they dynamically assemble context through using tools, right? I need more of that. I need more of this. Oh. But is cancer research or protein folding a problem of the type I need more? I have more questions that I need to pull in answer of. So and I'm no expert of this. But you see what I mean, right? That there's some kind of thinking going on there to form some kind of hypothesis of which information I actually need to get.
I heard, I think it was Demis Hassabis who said, when his definition of AGI is basically, or one example of it at least, was that if we just use the research up to 1905 or something and say, given this knowledge that we have, can we make an AI come up with relativity theory or theory of relativity that Einstein did? Then it's really
it's a good test.
Yeah, because you need to be really novel, you need to be really innovative, and that's something that AI is really bad at today. So for these kind of, and I guess that's similar to your cancer theory kind of hypothesis here as well. You need to really not just have memory recall, but really come up with these really novel, solutions. But I would argue potentially that a single shot solution to that is really hard. You need to instead have large interaction of more of an ecosystem.
It's probably a combination, but without the entity forming the hypothesis, I think that's where these small models are weak. Or actually, you can higher temperature and they can go bananas, right? Just spit out crazy tokens. So there's a brute force. There's a brute force mechanism. So that definitely could be true, right? So imagine having 5 billions of compute, 5 billions of compute, and just throwing very small, fast models running brute force testing. So that has worked before, right? We're talking about password cracking earlier. So that would be the equal of just trying huge amounts of trajectories and just seeing where. But then something needs to collect that and reason about. So, but this is the doomy version, is that that we can get cut off, right, for political reasons or whatever, to this.
Yeah, and the one that do have the power of the big frontier models, they will have a substantial advantage, of course,
and can put political pressure.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So for getting the premium healthcare, war capabilities, and these things.
Yeah. I mean, from a national security point of view, of course, having access to these models would be super important, I would argue. But, yes.
It's time for AI News, brought to you by AIAW Podcast.
We got a bit stuck here in too many interesting discussions, so we completely
forgot. It's a good sign, maybe.
Good sign. We normally, after an hour, take a small break to just speak about some of the recent AI news, and then come back to the discussion that we just had. So perhaps we can start. Do you have any specific news that you heard about that you'd like to share?
As a good, you mean general or AI or
AI? But it could be something else if you wanted to.
So AI, I think there's things happening all the time, so it's almost hard to, what is news today. So much in the bubble, so to speak, that nothing is kind of newsworthy.
I can start, and you can.
Maybe I come up with something.
Yeah, if you think something else, it's not been the most interesting kind of news weeks, I think, recently since last week, but there are some things, and also going back a bit to the agentic thinking here. For example, Google just added more of Gemini into Chrome, the browser.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And okay, that sounds like a semi-interesting thing, but I think, if you bring it into a larger context, and I usually try to say that, AI is really good in memory recall, as we said a number of times, but it's not that good in reasoning. It's starting to get a bit better, but still rather poor, and even worse in agentic tasks, I would say. But now when you have a Gemini model in the browser itself, and it can actually reason, across the tabs that you have. And, it can't really take actions yet, so it's not really agentic, I would say, but it can at least, use all the information throughout the tabs to answer questions and reason rather well about it. Then they say that in the future it will start to become more agentic, and actually you can tell it to go and buy this in Zalando or something, and it will actually be able to take these kind of actions as well. And then it really starts to become this kind of more proper agent. And I think it's a cool example of how we will see the future, where the human is more, just telling the agent what to do. And we have these kind of everyday agents that will, do the boring tasks for you. Yeah. Including browsing the web, which is super tedious sometimes, right? So in that sense, I think it's rather interesting. And, AI, and especially, even though this one is not really agentic yet, because it really can't take that much actions, it simply can answer questions about, what you see. They are saying the next step will be more, action taking as well, and browsing through. And that is kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, so I think on the browser level, a lot of things are happening. So we have Swedish company Strawberry Browser, Perplexity has their own Meteor or Comet or whatever it's called.
Comet, I think,
so I think it's an obvious, we spend so much time, we have too many tabs, right? Yeah. How can we get rid of that? So it's pretty obvious use case. And OpenAI is apparently building their own browser as well. So
yeah, it's interesting why so many frontier AI labs is going into the browser situation. I think Perplexity was trying to buy Chrome as well.
But I think you have to own the interface, right? That's what everybody's trying to do.
Why do you, by the way? Money, yeah. It could also be a data collection point of view.
Yeah,
the ad business.
Yeah, so if somebody can take your... So this is the biggest... This is why Chrome even exists, or Android. It's not because Google loves building handsets, right? It's like literally nobody else can do that because they can just collude with somebody else and get all the ads. So...
Yeah. It's probably what you say, Göran. It's the money thing, being able to find a revenue from these in some way or form. Yeah.
I mean, we discussed this some time ago, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a very big industry, and Google is just basically dominating everything. And now when ChatGPT is having quite a lot of users that are using it to Google and do all of these things, it's normal that they will go after ad. Also, keep in mind that they are borrowing money all the time. And when you borrow money from investors, they ask for you to, or they're thinking how you're going to grow the business. And if you look at their current revenue, they have not reached the limit, but they are pretty much there, right? So they can up the numbers of the pricing, so they can increase the revenue, or they need to find a new revenue stream.
But I think it's also the case, that the AI summaries that Google now have, similar to what Perplexity have had for some time, is causing less click-through, meaning less traffic to the sites, meaning less money to them. And they, Google got sued recently. I don't remember who, but some company got sued because, they don't get the traffic they used to get anymore. And I think they simply need to find another way to serve the ads, to get the traffic and let the companies make money from Google in some way.
So the ad business is the next thing, because these agents are becoming your search browsers. I mean, that is what it is. So it's just obvious. It's not anything there to think about. There's no conspiracy theories, etc. Just follow the money.
So that's what I mean a little bit. But I think the most of the kind of play is to own the consumer. And I think the B2B enterprise, a lot of this is mundane automation, except if you need to do medicine research, right? Then you might partner with OpenAI to power that branch. But for IT, automation, agents, efficiency, I think it's... there's not much frontier model business to be made there over time. Now it's probably a lot, but
I think the frontier model, they will simply serve as this kind of knowledge distillation kind of use cases where they simply are the best way to simply train a small model and distill it into them. Anyway, another news that I found a bit interesting, at least, is the investment in Intel. And actually, a couple of weeks ago, the US government invested a lot of money into Intel, and now NVIDIA did the same. And that
we had this last week.
NVIDIA as well? Not the NVIDIA one. No, the government, right?
Yes, no, NVIDIA and Intel, yes.
NVIDIA as well?
Yeah, last week. We covered it. But it's a very interesting, but there is I was planning actually, so you can continue on that because I have something to add on top of it because NVIDIA just did another thing. So.
Oh. Yeah, but I think, just thinking about, why they want to do it. Of course, everyone is super dependent on TSMC now in Taiwan that is building all the latest type of AI chips. And if that, that kind of dependency continue to exist, it is a really dangerous thing for NVIDIA and for US. So that's why US really want to find some alternatives and they want to have someone else. And Intel has historically been the chip provider, but they have lost that game a bit, at least from the AI.
Yeah, a lot, I would say.
Yeah. And simply now I think they're going for the 1.8 nanometer node directly, which of course would be super useful. And but it's hard without having the proper capital for it. It will be super hard to catch up with NVIDIA. That is the most valuable company in the world right now.
Yeah.
And have insane margins. So they get so much profit and they can reinvest that in R&D, and who can ever catch up?
Yeah.
But they can then invest it in Intel, and then they have, I think, some plans for a combined CPU GPU solution, which I think would be nice to just avoid the kind of strong dependency to TSMC at least.
Yeah. NVIDIA is investing up the stack as well. They know also that there might be, there might be a stop. So how can you reason about that, right? That they're investing in up the stack is that they might know that the money is worth more to invest in up in the application layer versus actually continue to invest in their own chip making. I think that's a little bit of a sign maybe that they're not going to be pounding out new chips at the same capacity, but I don't know. But there is a guy, I don't know if you saw, there's a guy called Leopold who wrote a very popular paper about a year ago, I think, called Situational Awareness. So he was an open AI researcher / analyst, 22 years old. And he now has a hedge fund, also called Situational Awareness. And he's doing incredibly well. So one of the bets he had when this Intel news broke is that he has a large position in his hedge fund for Intel. Yeah. And this thesis, right, situational awareness, is a lot about this. Scaling laws, national security. So there's been markers, and obviously I think the American government is unusually connected to tech. So there's people like David Sachs who's leading AI and crypto, and so there's a lot of connective tissue between Silicon Valley and the American government in this case. So I would expect more things like this to happen.
And of course, the tech is driving the U.S. economy to a large extent as well. So it's understandable. So, right. Cool. Did you have anything else, Göran? Or?
I had only one, actually. It's been a very boring week.
Yeah, it has, right?
Yeah.
I agree.
It's only Thursday.
Yeah, exactly.
We do this every Thursday.
So NVIDIA did another move. This time they basically signed a letter of intent for a $100 billion partnership that would could reshape how AI systems are trained and deployed. So this is a letter of intent between OpenAI and NVIDIA. So NVIDIA basically intends to invest around $100 billion in OpenAI. That means that basically they are buying a financial stake in OpenAI. And with that basically money, then OpenAI will buy chips from NVIDIA. Right, and now it's a very big discussion a little bit of those two companies getting together, because to some this might look like a little bit like, there's a monopoly now starting to happen, right? Because you have the biggest hardware company, and now let's say it's not the king of the software, but it's almost there, right? But in any case, moves are made in the United States, and as you can see, the money are fluctuating around. And keep in mind, every time they sign some kind of a letter, the stocks goes up. So you basically create 100 billion maybe from thin air.
That's right.
It's very interesting.
It's hard for them to fail. Whatever they invest in, they go up.
I think this was a particularly interesting story because Oracle is involved in this, and the Oracle stock went up like 10-15%.
No, 30%. I think
30%. Yeah. So there is like an interesting cycle. Somebody invests, but they buy. It comes back, right?
Yeah.
So
it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
So it's
they invest. The stocks are going back, going up. You basically just spend the money out of thin air, and you get the money from thin air.
And I think Nvidia is leasing out, building a leasing business for GPUs as well. I've heard.
Oh, really? Interesting. But it's also that Microsoft is trying to get away from the OpenAI dependency and investing even in Anthropic and companies like that. So the whole, like, trying to get off these kind of singular dependencies that has been to TSMC or to NVIDIA or to OpenAI, they're trying to always hedge these kind of dependencies, I think, now more and more.
Well, I think that companies are getting smarter, and the interesting thing that is happening in Europe. So yesterday I was in IVA. I was on that conference that they were presenting the recent paper that they did about like resilience of Sweden and etc. Right, and it was a beautiful event. A lot of discussion about cybersecurity and how much we need to invest in Sweden about that. Yeah. But the interesting thing is that if you look at it, so most of the companies now in Europe are trying. It's not AI on the top of it, it's actually sovereignty and resilience, right? So we had this trend moving from on-prem to cloud, or on-prem to hybrid to cloud, now back to hybrid, and maybe some of them actually directly on-prem, right? And we have local players that are emerging now, including the telecoms are starting getting in. And I think that Microsoft and many other organizations are starting to understand that, okay, this sovereignty or the globalization is over. Now we need to think a little bit like edges. We need to think a little bit like a decentralized thing. And where is the money is going to be in the future is in what is called AI as a service, so leasing basically AI factories. And the other one is the data centers, right? And I think if you look at the recent investments that NVIDIA, that Microsoft is doing, is exactly there. They just made a deal with Sweden. They made a deal with Norway. So we'll see. I think it's something is shaping. We are not seeing the figure yet, but it's becoming a little bit less blurry.
And NVIDIA is spreading up the tentacles, to every company and country around the world. I mean, they have too much money to spend, so they need to invest everywhere.
I think OpenAI is also negotiating this AGI clause, right, with Microsoft.
Right. So
I think Microsoft is forced to also pick some alternatives there, depending on how that goes.
Yes, this is about super intelligence. You see it? So train and run future models aimed super intelligence. So you are completely on the bug there.
The race into AGI and ASI then. Of course, the one that gets there will have a big impact. Okay, cool. Let's get back to the discussion here a bit, and perhaps we can switch a bit more into more philosophical kind of topics. And I know you love that, but if we go back perhaps to the sovereignty kind of question, what do you think about that? If we want to have more AI sovereignty and control of the data that we do have, how do you see Opper and perhaps now with Fine-Tune as well, that they can help with that?
Yeah.
Sorry for a rather broad or vague
question.
I
think it's actually a very clear one. So if you can get a model to perform, that is the challenge we're having right now. To get a model to perform on some repetitive task without us having to spend a lot of time engineering the right prompt and then redoing that work once a new model needs. They would need to switch the engine, basically.
Yeah.
So we think that journey, solving that problem, will allow you to come out on the other side with, here's my model, here's the way I interact with it, and I could technically move that to wherever I want.
Yeah.
So that is kind of the thought we have, is that we don't know how much of this needs to be able to run on-prem. We haven't, our technology is still like a SaaS, an API in the cloud. We have a European hosting for everything.
On the cloud or some on-prem for yourself? Or
it's nothing on-prem, like technically it's all, like in our case, on AWS in Europe. But we don't know. We haven't decided how to meet that potential need to be able to move this to separate environments, but it's something we're very open to.
But do you see a trend? I know a lot of companies are thinking, how can we get off the American dependencies in the cloud business, etc. And can you see that as well? And people or companies asking for that, or
yeah. I don't have a clear. There will be people and companies with various opinions. So there's definitely a subset that has that view, but there's also an equal amount who has kind of the flip view. So I don't actually have a strong sense of.
Okay.
I'm actually. I think more. If you look more at the trajectory, so I think people are more and more relaxed towards the idea of like a little bit of a healthy, pragmatic view on the we maybe as with cloud, right? We need something like a container, which in theory allow me to move from GCP to AWS, right? In case I need to, or host it completely. But that container aspect, like a Docker container aspect, I think is what is needed, that we can understand what is the model this agent works with.
Yeah. Yes, but then if we take it very concretely and say some companies are super afraid that Trump will simply enforce, a lot of tariffs now on anything running on the American clouds, and suddenly we have like 30% higher costs for running stuff on the cloud, and that could be completely ruin all the margins and kill companies very quickly potentially. And if that's very the case, you can see that companies are starting to look for alternatives and getting interested in that. My thinking here is that of course that's a challenge, but it's not. I think some people and some companies are oversimplifying, saying it's just about having some machines running in a data center somewhere, and they're not realizing the complexity of having all the software above it that Amazon and Google and Microsoft have. And it's really there. I mean, the complexity of running hardware is not really the big one. The big one is really the software, I would argue. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for the services, SES and queues and
exactly
all those load balancers and these
and
things,
having all of those integrated and working together, and all the security around it, and the operation, the monitoring that you need to have, and these kind of things that they do better than anyone, I would argue. Right?
Yeah, but at the same time, they do it at a scale that you wouldn't have to need to. So I actually think...
But doesn't that lower the cost then? Since they can do it at that scale, they can actually have a lower cost for
sure,
it. Right?
For sure. Yeah, I think so. But they also make a margin. But I think... Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's comparable though, like the software and AI fully.
If I phrase it like this, then some we're building these kind of AI gigafactories and more AI factories, meaning data centers that are specially designed to run AI loads on them. And yeah, that can be fun. But in reality, what you really need is be able to operate applications in some way. And applications need more than the AI model. They need to run their backends and frontends, at least the backends, in a good way. And then they need to be closely integrated with a cloud solution that can run the backends as well. And for me, it's kind of strange how you can focus and spend so much money on just the AI model serving part and perhaps training, even more on the training part, but not really on the operating the rest of the application part. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking, if we now have a huge data center that have a lot of GPUs in them, and okay, you can train a model there, but you're not even allowed, which you're not in some European HPC clusters, to serve the models there, then how could you use it? You can do a one-off training, but that's not really how agile companies work. I mean, then you have a loop where you iterate and you continuously train them and serve them, and then you have to, of course, have the application running with the rest of the backend, and that needs to be closely integrated with the model as well.
Yeah, for sure. So it's not an easy. There's lots of intricate dependencies with models and software and architecture and dependencies and things like that. But I think if you're ISO 27001, DORA, no company, there's these requirements are already built into the fabric of being a important company. So all of those requirements will need to be applied even in the domain of AI, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to have business continuity, right? You need to be able to have disaster recovery. Yeah. And I don't think we're even close to having that discussion with regards to LLMs.
Yeah.
So what happens if we pull... what happens if Trump decides to implement tariffs on the frontier labs and the cost rises with 5x?
Yeah, exactly.
And Apoteket stops working, right?
Yeah, or SOS alarm or whatever.
Yeah, and this is a blocker even for the adoption of making these services efficient. So this is something I feel very strongly about. We have to accelerate the path to SLMs and commoditize the compute, software, and model layer for the agentic stack. Because that's when we're going to actually see serious developments of these kind of core infrastructure services that we all rely on, where it would be absolutely magical. Imagine, SOS, right? 112 at the speed of agents that works.
Yeah, imagine that.
And self-driving ambulances, and I mean we have the pieces are starting, like they're here in 3 years, right? Self-driving cars, the ability to operate a telephone line. Like the technology is here, but it's going to require huge amounts of work to actually stitch these things together in a reliable way.
Sometimes I wish there were an Opper, but for more general purposes. So, I mean, you're trying to abstract away perhaps dependencies to a single model provider and being able to have reliability in different type of model providers. But what if we had the same for cloud providers, saying we have a general kind of interface, specification, API, where you can run your software, and it's very easy to switch between these kind of multi-cloud situations, and then perhaps soon also move off American clouds, right?
It's Kubernetes.
But that's low down in the tech stack.
In the cellar,
you need more upstairs. I mean, serverless kind of solutions and whatnot that can actually easily be transitioned from one cloud provider to another.
Yeah.
And we have these kind of OpenStack, but still, if we were to have a more general solution like that allows us to use the American clouds, when we are so dependent because there are no alternative, but allows us to very easily switch over to something else once it does exist. That would be a nice way forward, right?
Yeah.
So you need to expand your
business model.
Yes.
We have enough as is, but there are alternatives. Like we have railway, I think they're called in the Netherlands, I believe.
Yeah, but how much work would it be for a company that is heavily Azure like dependent to move to that, right?
Yeah, but probably the same work as if moving from Azure to AWS, right?
Yes and no, I would say, but they are so similar. I think the top three there, but sure.
But so actually, I was talking to one of my colleagues. One of the magics of AI and like Cursor and Codex is Terraform.
Yes,
like absolutely bonkers in terms of being able to work with these YAML files or whatever it is.
Similar to the specification that you work with, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's absolutely, his words, like, astounding. And so if we imagine that the whole idea with Terraform, right, is that you have a provider and you can kind of move from one to another.
They just need to include AI and
so there's a Terraform provider for Evrock or whatever compute center, which is the same like MCP idea of MCP.
I was thinking the same actually. You would just have to have MCP service for everything.
So I think there's a lot of things that is going to get developed in the next year to integrate, because agents are here, they're just very unevenly distributed
and not very powerful yet, I think.
But they're more powerful. No, actually, they're more powerful than
before. Yes, but
more than. Yeah, I would challenge everybody to question the assumption of if they tried building agents. So maybe there is a trick or something new, right? That has changed, because right now they are
they're powerful, but it's not AGI level. I mean, you can't really start to replace people in general.
No, and I don't think that's the but automate long running tasks. So imagine workflows where you're pulling from one system, then writing to a doc, into an Excel sheet, pulling from that, moving to sending an email crafted in a tone of voice. That's where we are. That's the frontier. 15 minutes, 30 minutes kind of task, costs 7 to 10 kronor to execute it. That's reality today. So, and I think that's where actually that is what we need to deliver a lot of value actually.
And it could create a lot of value for a lot of companies.
But replacing people on a roles, I think we're far from that.
And we don't even want to.
No, maybe that will be an unfortunate outcome, but hopefully replaced with economic prosperity in other ways, if that happens at scale.
Agreed. And normally if the price goes down, the demand goes up in some sense. So if it's super much cheaper to drive a cab or get like transportation, then more people will use it. So it's not a zero-sum game in that sense.
Exactly.
As things get cheaper to do, then more people will want it. So therefore the same kind of need will, or even higher need will exist. Okay, cool. Perhaps one more, speaking about this, just continue that discussion. What do you think about software engineers? And of course, AI is growing in scale here, especially for coding. And you have kids as well. Would you advise them to learn how to code?
I've tried. I actually had 5 teenage guys joining us at work, building in Replit. Building an agent in Replit, and also working with dataset curation to get an idea of that. So I'm quite happy that my oldest son is 15. He's now started studying in gymnasium nature, natur. It's really so. And I remember having some casual discussion with him quite a while back. And I live in the northern parts of Stockholm. Everybody's studying economy. Everybody will be an economist or a lawyer. And knowing what I know, like this kind of knowledge work will have a expiry date. Probably also software engineers at the volume where, so in where I live, there's like 90 people taking economy. It's like the majority of the entire school is studying an economy. It's the ratio of the different roles is not right. So he's studying nature. So this is, I think, from my thesis is like understanding nature, understanding technology, physics, chemistry.
Yeah, the basics.
The basics, yeah. Because the ChatGPT will be mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to compete on. Yeah. But to actually take that information and do something in the physical world, if that's repairing a robot or doing service of a robot, or I don't know what that work is, but that's kind of how I think about it. Like maybe study the essential sciences, and then if programming, to be honest, is a little bit on the top, it's intellectually stimulating and fun to do.
It is fun.
So it's worth studying anyway, but maybe the career aspect of it is questionable, how that will look like.
But I like what you're saying about learning the basics. I have this theory, or Sam Altman had this idea of the single person unicorn, and I like that kind of thinking. What he basically made a bet on is that there will be a number of years in the future, not that many, where we will have a first unicorn company worth $1 billion that's been built and operated by a single person. Now, if that's the case, of course, that will be an extreme. But if we think that's the direction, it means that people can take on more general roles in some sense. If it's a single person unicorn, it means that person have to understand all the aspects of the company, including finance, economy, programming, sales, and whatnot, to be able to operate it. So the person has to be super general in some way. So if we believe that's the case, and if we just say coding, if we think also that will go more generic, meaning you don't need to know all the details if it's TypeScript or JavaScript or Go or Python or C++ or whatever language, it's more on the generics or the basics of what coding is that you have to learn. And then the AI will solve, the details of the language underneath or the specific, libraries and frameworks that you have. And I think that could be like a good sense that you still need to understand the basics. You need to, perhaps you can specialize in coding, but then you are more on the like system design kind of level where you can direct as you can more or less today in Cursor or in Replit to say, do this, but okay, then you see what it do. And no, not that, but do this instead. So you direct and control and review more what the agents, so to speak, are doing for you. And perhaps that will continue to happen for more and more areas, and not just in coding, but in finance, economy, and so much more.
Yeah, like the industry of servicing the agents, robots, software agents, I think will be a big industry.
I like the term, we all as humans become agent managers in the future.
Yeah.
we become the manager of a set of agents, and we tell them what to do, and we review them and try to make them work as well as possible.
But the question is, you were saying like we all need to be generalists.
Or more general.
More general, yeah. But the future can also be that it's super simple. Like there's agents helping me from society, right? Starting a company. Like I don't need to assume any risk because like there's an agent that is gonna, micromanage me basically. As a like I don't just send me the receipt and like all of these services could be like embodied into real-time tax declaration, right? Like there's so many assumptions we're doing around how we're sometimes thinking very incrementally, right? The world will look the same, but it also will be very different on top, right? But what if actually our services evolve as we kind of expect them should do, right? Like maybe we should have more rolling tax declaration. Why do we do this once per year? It's probably an information theory problem that was originally solved, where you had papers and stuff. But so I think it's generally very good to be very, very open-minded and very, very curious. And that's why I think you get by studying the sciences. Like you get an awe for nature, for chemistry, for physics, and there's no like right and wrong. There's nobody has decided. It just is what it is, right?
Yeah, you can't argue with the laws of nature.
No,
right?
exactly.
Was it Elon Musk says the only laws are those of nature. All other laws are just recommendations. I think it says.
Yeah.
Cool. Super fun discussions here, and perhaps we can start to end up with a bit more philosophical topic as well. And for one, do you believe AGI will come, and do you have some kind of time frame for when AGI may happen?
So I thought I would have a clear answer. In the past, I felt like yes, it will come, and a very kind of clear idea how it would look like. But now it's very fuzzy. One part I think it's already here. Like I think a lot of I actually like OpenAI's definition of AGI, the majority of economically valuable tasks, or something in that.
Or to be as good as an average coworker. Sam Altman has said.
So I think that we're actually scaffolding away from that mostly. I'm not saying completely. The models would definitely help there, but I think we're essentially there. We just put the pieces together. Largely,
but we can't yet replace an average coworker. Right?
No, not you. But FTE on slicing it horizontally, right? So if I can carve out 15 minutes from you and hundreds of your colleagues, that ends up being one colleague.
Okay, in
that
sense,
we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I don't think about ChatGPT then. I think about more time reporting. These things that consumes times for everybody, just making the system flow more smoothly, doing tax declaration in real time, but at work where we don't do taxes, but something else, right? Like skip that sales report every Friday. That's an hour. So I think a lot of it, that's where I think we're already there. And maybe it's this super intelligence, which I think is more around cancer, curing cancer, these things, where I think we're not yet at, for sure.
Yeah, quite some time before that.
Yeah.
But okay, assume that at some point we will have AGI or ASI, then we can imagine like two extremes. One extreme could be that we have the dystopian kind of nightmare, the Matrix of the world, or the Terminators, and the robots is trying to kill us all. Or we can think a utopian way where we actually do have AI that is curing cancer and is helping with the energy needs, and it's more or less, all the products and goods are going towards zero cost, and we have a world of abundance where we don't really need to work if we don't want to, but we can basically have a world of abundance. Where do you think we will end up in this kind of spectrum?
I think it's all in our hands. Like it's up to us to create the future we want to be a part of. If we want to see one or the other happen, to me it's super obvious that if we don't do anything, somebody else will do it. Yeah. And back to this, and we will not have the ultimate health care, because that is going to be AI that is creating the best medical advice for me on a personal level. That is going to happen through AI. Yeah. So if we are very bullish on this technology and very curious and very aggressively trying to pursue it with a curious mind, then the Doomy version will happen. It will be provided to us, so to speak. That's my view. And then if the question is what will happen, I can't think of another than that. Let's just do our job and move towards that future. I can't go around being skeptic about. Of course, there is too little investments. There is too little, experimentation. There is too much regulation.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm being foolish there, but probably. But this has to be the case that it's for good reasons that people are that. But I doubt it in many cases. But
yeah, the development will move on in one direction or the other, and the more we can control it in a good direction, the better. And I guess that's what we should all work for to make it happen, right?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. So, of course, people, I'm really scared. I usually say it like this. I'm not afraid when we have ASI, but I'm really afraid when we have AI that is stupid, which we have it today, but people that use it for bad intentions. That's something that can happen today. And it's easy for a human to use it for purposes that is not good for humankind. And that's I'm scared of. And then we can think of, how can we control that and avoid that? And then we can think, okay, should other humans try to monitor and avoid that happening? I think that's super hard for humans to do manually. Yeah. So the question then is that you need AI to help you to supervise and ensure that we do have a safe environment and society. So what I'm really hoping for is that we will survive during the time of stupid AI until we have the time of smart AI that supervise other AIs. Then I will feel much safer. And I would be really scared about having this kind of one kind of country or company that have full control, which we in some ways, without saying names, are moving a bit towards. That would be really scary to me. So we need to have a smorgasbord of good AIs that is supervising each other. And then I would feel much safer.
I think that's, I would subscribe to that.
So let's hope that we survive until that happens. And Göran Sandahl, it was a true pleasure to have you here. So many interesting discussions. And I hope you stay on for some more off-the-camera discussions. That will be super fun. Thank you so much for coming here.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Cheers.